Well, welcome to the Top Gun Show. Today we have the one, the only Jay McBain. Jay is a principal analyst serving B2B professionals for Forrester Research. His background is in channel leadership, sales, marketing, and operations with specific emphasis on indirect sales strategies. Jay is renowned for his industry thought leadership. He's truly an expert in building and leveraging channel communities. I could spend 10 minutes talking about his amazing background and credentials, but let me just sum it up. He's like the Wizard of Oz for our industry. He's all-knowing and all-seeing. He's like the old E.F. Hutton commercial. When E.F. Hutton talks, people listen. Jay, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for that great intro. And now I'm thinking about Wizard of Oz, and I'm thinking about all kinds of things. That's great.
I chase silver things, around. Well, hey, Jay, thanks for being on the show. I was reading your What I See Coming for the channel in 2020, the predictions last year. And I want to say, while you didn't predict the pandemic, social unrest, or murder hornets, you really did hit the nail on the head in some areas. We will get to the upcoming predictions of 2021 in a few minutes, but let's talk about the first prediction you made last year. Indirect sales will shrink every year for the next decade. Please explain your logic on that.
Yeah, so this one was probably the most controversial because 75% of world trade flows indirectly. You bought your last car from a dealer, you buy your last TV from a retailer, you bought your last jar of peanut butter from a grocer. 64% of the tech industry flows indirectly. We know that big companies like Microsoft drive 96% of their business through the channel. So how could this possibly shrink when the channel is more important than ever? And we started to see some converging trends, which accelerated because of the pandemic. But the 64% itself is a tale of two cities. One is the client server era. And I worked for companies like IBM and Lenovo, where it was like well north of 80% indirect. But if you look at the multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, if you look at the areas of the business now that are growing at 50% or triple digits like RPA, all of the fastest growing parts of our industry are only about 20 to 30% resold. It doesn't mean that partners aren't involved, because they are in over 90% of the cases. It's just the way the money changes hands.
Great stuff, great stuff. And you saw that at the end of 2019 for 2020. The next prediction you made for last year was that marketplaces would make their mark. Now, as a senior channel sales manager for AppSmart, whose big differentiator is our digital marketplace, this one's near and dear to my heart, but why don't you elaborate on that statement?
Yeah, we started to see all the signals. The companies that are thinking about subscription models ended up announcing it in 2020. From Cisco to Dell to IBM to HPE, every company is coming full on subscription. You don't buy Netflix from your cable guy in the white van, you buy it digitally. And in the world where the average solution now has 7 layers, the digital connective tissue is marketplaces. And what was interesting, and again, we didn't predict the pandemic, but marketplaces grew more in the first 3 months of the pandemic than they did in the last 10 years combined. So talk about making a prediction, having it come right in the first couple of weeks of a pandemic, and then hitting it over the fence, where we think that upwards of 17% of this industry, a $3.5 trillion industry, is going to go through marketplaces as quickly as the end of this year.
Let's look now towards the near future, 2021. In the first mention in your blog for when you talked about 2021, you predict that the channel will benefit from the changing future of work. How is that?
Yeah, so the one thing is, given a pandemic, we're just over a year into this pandemic, and we're hoping for the end of the pandemic, but we're still a couple of quarters away from normalcy. The fact of the matter is, we survey 690,000 technology buyers every year, and buyers of other things, and we ask them a lot of questions. But today we know the number one spending area in the world is automation. I mentioned the growth of RPA, for example. Number 2 is in cloud acceleration. I mentioned some of the growth rates of Azure and AWS and Google. Number 3 is this new remote topology. Early in the pandemic, we took the entire supply chain down of laptops. Everybody became a Zoom expert overnight. Well, later on in the pandemic, a couple of quarters in, the real questions started coming. One was, how do we secure these new threat vectors? Cyber criminals were a step ahead as, cats were sleeping on our keyboards and kids are getting homeschooled in the next room. We knew that 50% of security is a human issue, and that there was new threat vectors and a new zero trust and a new layers of security that had to come in quick, to protect that consumer laptop on a consumer network going through a consumer router that you share with your neighbors at the street. We know that there's different levels of compliance and governance, productivity. We know that there's continuity. There's about 17 other tech services that are now following, where managed service providers are seeing double-digit growth in terms of what this remote topology is driving, which is different than client server, which is different than multi-cloud hybrid cloud. It's a third topology, and for many companies has gone beyond their capacity or capabilities to manage.
The second prediction you made is, again, really interesting to me, since AppSmart is, after all, the #1 subscription commerce platform in the world today. You mentioned that subscription or consumption models will become mainstream, but you mentioned that the channel isn't ready. What do you mean by that?
Well, it elongates the customer journey. So there's a bunch of things happening at once, and they're all happening right now. So if you're following the news, last week, some major things happened, like Google getting religion on privacy. Apple, the next iOS update on all of our phones is going to protect your privacy. So we know that buyers early in the journey want to be anonymous. They don't want to talk to salespeople. They want to go on this digital or digital only journey. Well, up until last week, you had 8,000 companies in a MarTech stack to go collect all these cookies and retargeting and all this stuff and tell you what, we were all the product on the internet. And this week we're not. So the only way companies in every industry are going to learn about their buyers early in the journey are through an ecosystem. 76% of CEOs think that their current business model will be unrecognizable in 5 years, and ecosystems are the #1 reason why. Their investors are pushing them into subscription and consumption models. I rattled off those Fortune 100 companies that have already committed 100% subscription. Every day, we're having new companies come out and commit, like this week was Nutanix, committed 100%. So you can imagine that everything that you buy today, both consumer and professional lives, are going to go subscription. And people are thinking about your toothbrush, they're thinking about your Dollar Shave Club, they're thinking about your mattress, but they're thinking about your technology, they're thinking about your software. Everything is going into a 30-day recurring model. Managed service providers know about this, telecom agents know about this business, but now everyone is being introduced to this.
Great content, man. It gives you. I'm excited to be part of the channel. I think we have tremendous opportunities going forward. So if you want more information on this, check out Jay's blog on Forrester.com. Additionally, little commercial here, he'll be the keynote speaker at our upcoming AppSmart Unleash event on April 20th and 21st. Register for that because you don't want to miss that. But Jay, I know you're a big fan of the Top Gun Show and that there are millions and millions of viewers watching you right now. Why don't you share with the viewers a little known interesting fact about yourself?
Well, just to relate it back to Top Gun, it was one of my favorite movies. It came out when I was 15 years old. After watching that movie and watching Tom Cruise, take off on the motorcycle, with the jet in the background, chasing after the girl, that changed my life. I actually wrote a blog about butterfly effects. That was one of the most instrumental parts of my life, watching Top Gun. And after that, I was 15 years old. I took my last drink, and I've never had a sip of alcohol since that movie came out in 1987. So
Wow.
The reason I don't drink is not because of any other reason than I saved all my money to buy that motorcycle. It took me 6 months, and it was $4,000 to buy that bike that he had in the movie. And after buying the bike, I was in Canada, so I saved up again to go buy a truck and other things. And from that day on, I just started saving money, and to be kind of have that motorcycle. And today I've got that same kind of bike, a brand new one. I've got kind of that world of Top Gun. So there it links directly to your show. And one of the most monumental things happened to me when I was 15 years old in 1987.
And this is the stuff that you can only hear on the Top Gun Show. Jay, thanks so much for being a guest today. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for watching, everybody.